Good morning and welcome to another episode of The Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. Today, my guest is Akil Parker, Akil L. Parker, a math genius, or at least a math educator, somebody who's going to make us understand how it is important for our young people to learn to love math early in life and to have access to real math. In my life, I would say that math was life-changing in some material ways in the form of jobs that I could and could not have. We were just talking about that a minute before we went live just now. But in the lives of our young people and our children, there's so much more than just jobs or whatever, that math opens the door to a lot of, I think, expansive thinking, the ability to decode a very complex world, the ability to understand what's a good loan and what's a bad loan and understand your finances, all rooted and based in math. Akil Parker is a math professor at Cheney University. He's also a 100% HBCU educated giant. Went to Lincoln, Morgan State, and Morehouse. So for those of you who watch every day who love HBCUs as I do, this is what it looks like to have one of our own ascend to a level where they become the person that you can look at and raise up and say, this is a great example of what we all could be and what we can have our young people become. But also, they also become the person who gets the next generation up to that level and teaches, like educators, people who don't just get the knowledge for themselves, but get it for us, for the rest of us and our children. That is a big deal. So Akil, welcome, brother. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you sharing your space and your platform with me.
This is one of the most important things I can think to share it with, because we talk and we have talked on this show a lot about reading, the importance and the science of reading. And we talk a lot about the achievement gap and what I call the achievement gospels. Like, what's the good news around achievement? Like, what can we do? Let's stop talking about the negative, like what can't be done. We also talk about racial essentialism, which is on my mind a lot, which is, in education, to me, that just basically means either educators or the system takes a look at your demographics and they look at your color, your race, your background, your parents, and then they tell you that tells me everything I need to know about how much you can achieve. Right. Like, we feel like the education system does that too much. Poor kids can't learn. Oh, you got a single mom, you can't learn, So I am looking for the good news. Like, what is the good news around that? Imagine you're going to give me some today about the hardest topic, which is math. We have math phobia. I just think in general, Americans do, not just Black folks or any color people. Americans have math phobia. So let me ask you, just like from the outset, how did you discover like math was your thing and a love for math, which it feels like that cuts against the grain of what so many American students see as like their talent?
So I wouldn't say I didn't say it didn't really become my thing per se until many years later, until I became a teacher, teaching mathematics in Philadelphia, different charter schools in Philly, and then at a couple of public high schools in Philly. Growing up, in my K through 12 experience, for the majority of my schooling, I did well. I did, pretty well in math. I had some rough patches in a couple of years. But I kind of just, I needed a job. After I was a bank examiner for a year, moved to Philadelphia, graduated from undergrad from Morgan State University, 2003, and then moved to Philadelphia. I was a bank examiner working with the FDIC for a year, and that didn't work out for me. So I was looking for another career path, and I had always, considered myself, a good math student, and people had told me that, as a Black man, with a math background, if you can teach math, you can write your own ticket. So, the economics came into play because, I also had a baby on the way. I don't want to support my child. So this is like, we're talking about back in like 2004, 2005, and so then, I started doing substitute teaching back in 2005. And then from there, I kind of, did some, I guess, soul searching and looked in introspectively and said, if I really put my mind to this, I probably could become good at this, one day. And I just never looked back. And I just kept teaching. And then I really enjoyed teaching, and being in the classroom with the youth and, being, fellowshipping, with the young sisters and the young brothers and, learning from them and, then learning how to teach really by trying to teach them, trying out different methods and whatnot. So I guess math became my thing, when I started to realize that I could, break things down in certain ways that previous teachers may not have been able to. And it's especially when I worked with adult learners, because I started working with adult learners back in like 2007 at the University of Pennsylvania in their Veterans Upward Bound program. So I'm in there, I'm working with 50, 60-year-olds, a wide assortment of ages, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. And they were kind of like old heads. They were like my old heads. They would school me about life. And then it was like, there was a reciprocity there because, I'm teaching them algebra and they teaching me about life. At that time, I'm like in my late 20s, my mid to late 20s, so there was that. And then it was just like the sentiment that, wow, like I wish you'd have been my teacher 20 years ago. I wish you'd been my teacher 30 years ago, like there was this, that kind of was like repeated a lot. So then I started to see that, okay, I have a little bit of talent with this. So let me try to take this even more seriously. And then, around maybe 2009 or so, I got involved with the Philadelphia Freedom Schools program. And then that's when it really took it to another level. I got introduced to like Dr. Greg Carr and other people that were involved with Philadelphia Freedom Schools. And then I got, involved with ASCAC as an organization, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. I learned about Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop and the work that he was doing with, trying to, bring, let the world know science through the use of science as a tool and physics, and mathematics that, Egypt is really part of Africa. So it caused me to, kind of look at this. Once I realized Diop was a mathematician, it made me look at teaching math in a whole different light, thinking about it in the geopolitical sense, and then as math as a part of our African culture. And us, me looking at it like, wow, like this is much deeper than just, teaching students how to solve these systems of equations in these racist textbooks,
So say more about that part right there, because there's such a big argument right now about like so-called woke math and woke academics and whatever. And there's almost like a flippant kind of brushing off of the cultural aspect of these, what are considered to be just hard sciences or hard disciplines. So say more about how it helps necessarily to take a different lens for something like math. One of the basic questions that critics have is they'll say, like, does 2 + 2 not become 2 or become 4 when you add some sort of cultural lens to it or whatnot? They try to like really kind of discount the cultural spot. What is it that you learned in being around all those giants that you were talking to that actually made it make sense that the cultural lens should be on things like math?
So I mean, one of the things from, being in like the ASCAC space, I'll say, and being involved with the different study groups, and, shout out to the SEPTEPI study group, it's facilitated by Bob and Ron McCoy here in Philadelphia. We used to meet at the UNIA building right on Cecil B. Moore Avenue on Saturdays. One of the things, you learn is that this more recent conversation and this critique and pushback on so-called woke math or, culturally relevant pedagogy is just the next iteration of something that has really always been going on in this society. And more recently, it's real heavy in the 1980s. We have like the Diane Ravitches and the Arthur Schlesingers, they were, pushing this narrative that, African people of African descent basically learning about things within their own cultural framework was un-American. And I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, fine. I try not to get into those arguments because I know what we need to do anyway. So, and I think a lot of times those arguments become distractions from the real work that we need to be doing anyway. But the thing is that all education is already culturally relevant. The question we have to ask is whose culture is being, exposed and whose culture is it relevant to. So, I mean, if they want to push back on the concept of being culturally relevant in education, then, I mean, because you're not really talking about education if you're not educating within a culture that's relevant to the student, because you have to meet with education, you have to meet people where they are, and where people are is within their own culture. So it only will make sense to have conversations and create examples and create word problems or, try to, explain concepts and present concepts in a way that is relevant to the student, because that would be the most appropriate. So, but it's a very political thing. If you think about like, Amos Wilson, one of the major takeaways I got from like studying his work is, there's a political necessity for Black children, especially, to be poor math students, because and then I'll go to another person, Bob Moses, Bob Moses and Charles Cobb, they co-authored Radical Equations. And then they present the premise that mathematics education is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. So if we believe and subscribe to that, which I do, we're talking about mathematics being a gatekeeper of not only being able to secure employment, but if we get into in a Pan-African context, we get into independent nation building. You have to know math. We have to know all subjects, but especially you got to know math and the STEM disciplines, because you're talking about maintaining a society, building a society from the ground up. You got to make sure people get their water, people get their food. People, we got to have supply chain management. We got to have factories. We got to manufacture everything. People need Wi-Fi. There's computer science we got to do. We got to deal with blockchain technology. All of this is grounded in mathematics. So once you kind of block a large portion of a community or a group or a race out of that, then you as an oppressive group that want to maintain your power and your control, then you're more safe and you're more comfortable. So I think that the people behind the scenes, they're very forward thinking, and they understand the power in, it's kind of like Frederick Douglass, knowledge makes you unfit to be a slave. So-called Master Auld came in and checked his wife and said, listen, you can't teach that boy to read, because once you teach him to read, he'll be unfit to be a slave.
Forever unfit to be a slave.
With mathematics, there are many parallels, especially if you look at mathematics as a language in and of itself. Because it really is a language.
It's a language though that we're not learning though. So yeah. I wonder, what's the missing link? What's the thing that isn't being done in classrooms or should be done differently? Why aren't we acquiring, like you just mentioned, Bob Moses's book, Radical Equations. Bob Moses has had the Algebra Project for years. I think it's the most novel concept in anything in civil rights, that math itself should be a civil right. A lot of us think about literacy as the most eternal thing that striving Black people have strived for post-slavery, during Reconstruction, emancipation, civil rights, whatever. Literacy was a big deal. But math is one of the biggest literacies. It's like one of the biggest languages you should learn, because you just named all the reasons why. If you want to build your freedom in a society and a self-sufficient, community, it's all based on math, right? 100%. So we know that. So what is going wrong in our systems of educating young people about what they need to be free, and how we educate them, that we haven't gotten this math part right? What is happening in classrooms? What will we do differently to get more of them learning?
I think that mathematics, I think it has a lot to do with marketing and promotion and public relations. Math has been branded as an accepted deficiency. It's almost like people, like I said this on I think the Three Woke Aunties podcast. Shout out to them for having me on.
Shout out.
Yeah, people a lot of people trauma bond, and it's almost like you're part of an elite group. It's almost like there's pride taken in it. It's kind of like in our community when somebody says, "Oh, he's crazy" or "she's crazy." It's like that sister or that brother needs some mental health services. They need some therapeutic support services. But what we've done is we've kind of internalized and accepted it, and we see it as something that we can't do anything about. So we almost celebrate it. So it's like people are kind of wear this kind of mathematical ignorance. So I don't want to use the term ignorant, because that sounds mean, for lack of a better term.
It is what it is, though.
A lack of understanding, I say, a lack of understanding, because they haven't been taught properly. They haven't been properly taught, right? Kind of wear it as as a badge, a badge of courage. It's like I earned my stripes. I'm not good at math neither. All of us in here, we're not good at math. So I think math is kind of, we collectively accept it as it's an accepted deficiency, and I think we have to look at it differently. We just got to start looking at it very differently and look at it as something like, no, we can't. Just like we wouldn't generally just be proud of the fact yo, I can't read. There are a lot of people that cannot read per se, but they hide that. They kind of
hide a stigma that. To that. That's
stigmatized.
Yeah.
But there's no real stigma attached to not being able to solve equations. And I think that there is a phobia. It is a social emotional issue. Just like, with young students, they feel traumatized by the teacher asking them to read, if they were unable to in third grade and raise their hand and read in front of the class. A lot of students that are traumatized by being asked to solve this equation or identify like what's the coefficient in this expression. Like they don't even know what a coefficient is, or they weren't taught that. So there's a lot of social emotional trauma, I guess, in terms of that as well. But we kind of just accept it. And then we also look at mathematics as more specialized. And because it's more specialized, then it's like, okay, it's like organic chemistry. Like I can say I'm not an expert at organic chemistry. So I don't feel bad about not being an expert at organic chemistry. I probably should, because if I understood organic chemistry, then maybe I'd be able to make some different life decisions. But I also have the confidence to know that if I wanted to pursue and study and understand organic chemistry, I could go to resources, whether, books or online, or consult with some of my friends and, contemporaries that are experts at organic chemistry, and I could learn it. But mathematics is like something where we like, it's like, okay, well, that's kind of specialized. And we also have programmed ourselves to this belief that we don't need mathematics, which gets complicated because there's so many different levels to mathematics and aspects of it. It's like, well, because you might say, well, I don't need trigonometry. But then it's like, okay, how do you know that you don't need it? Like, you don't know when you'll be in a situation. And a lot of us have been in situations. Like, I know I've been in situations where I needed mathematical, competency. And I kind of look back sometimes and I'm like, wow, like if I really didn't know how to do percentage calculation problems in that situation, I would have been this would have been a messed up situation. This wouldn't have went down the way I wanted it to. This kind of went down favorably for me because I was able to do that mental calculation and I just understood it conceptually.
But
right?
That's a good point, though, just in that people do learn survival math.
Yeah.
So like if you go to the store and you buy a pack of cigarettes and a Slim Jim or something, I don't know, and you give a $20 bill, you get the right change because you know enough survival math to know when you're being robbed of some change in a situation. And what'd you say?
Sometimes though, but see the problem is like a lot of times we don't learn the survival math, and some people think they do, but they're getting robbed every day. And they don't even know it. Sometimes you get robbed by a small amount, which you consider a small amount. And then we make these excuses and we say, oh, well, that's only 5 cents anyway. They only take it 10 cents. But that's your money though. That's your money. If you know how to make the calculation. And I think a lot of times there are predatory store owners, just like there are predatory payday lenders, that set up shop in communities where they know people don't have the mathematical competency to defend themselves against this type of theft, and they'll smile in your face and they'll rob you without a gun. They'll rob you without a gun because you don't have the math skills. I talked to my I teach at an adult education program in North Philly, One Bright Ray, and I teach adult learners, people that have dropped out of high school for different reasons in the past, and I teach a personal finance course there, and we're going over simple interest, and we're doing like, okay, we're talking about loans, and then it's like. I'm like, see, so when you go to these car dealerships and they come to you and they're trying to act like they're your friend and they're saying, well, how much do you want your payment to be? And then you think you're getting over on them because you're getting a low monthly payment, not realizing that that's going to extend the length of the loan. The longer your payment, it's like as long as I owe you, you'll never go broke. That cliche really comes into play because it's like, oh, you got a $150 a month car payment. You're going to be paying for that loan for like 8 years, maybe. So that's more interest that finance company or that bank is getting. The car dealership don't care. They get the check from the bank, that day anyway. They don't care. It's about that bank maximizing their profit that they can make off you. But just to like not even understand that, so I'm trying to like show them like, listen, these are the numbers. Like
yeah, and you know what? In that case, it makes it more expensive to be poor.
Exactly.
Like I will say this much. So in my own lifetime, especially earlier in life, there were lots of things that seemed convenient that were hella expensive, but you didn't know it, right? Like Rent-A-Center. I had a house full of Rent-A-Center furniture at one time. And I was like, damn, all this is just going to be $75 a week. And I'll own it eventually. Man, I would own it when I'm 72. I was in my 20s, and it was like, didn't think twice about it because the payment seemed low enough. Didn't do the extended math and the insurance or the interest and how long it takes. And you mentioned payday lenders. They're a lot like that. When you go to get car loans, you mentioned that. Definitely when you get mortgages, a point here or there, you just don't know how much money that's going to cost you if you're not already thinking that way. But I do get when people think like, when am I ever going to use calculus really, or statistics or trigonometry? that almost feels like a sport or a luxury sport, like someone playing lacrosse. Like you're in high school and that's that dude who's doing calculus at a real high level because he wants to go to UC Berkeley or something. And you're like, that's almost like lacrosse to you.
So I can kind of see that and see. So with calculus, I wish my level of understanding of calculus was more on par with my understanding of like algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and even statistics. But I will say, so I can't really speak to more. I can't speak as I guess intelligently about the practical uses of calculus. I mean, I know like, by definition, you have derivative calculus, which, enables you to find the rate of change at an instantaneous moment. That's part of it. And then the other part is like the integral, which enables you to find the area of, oblong shapes where you can't really use the area of a rectangle formula or the area of a trapezoid formula or the area of a triangle or circle formula. But I will say, like, with any math, and, I think this would extend, some of my brothers and sisters that, have specialized in calculus could probably attest to this, is that it just really just further, develops your level of just mathematical understanding and critical thinking. So like, regardless of whatever situation you're in, it really just enables you to just approach complex problems, no matter what the problem is, whether it's like, okay, I'm having this interpersonal relationship problem, this romantic issue with, with my wife or with my husband. And, how do I break this down? How should I look at this? What is a systematic way for me to approach this, where we can both be happy and we can both make some improvements in this relationship. And I just think that the higher level math, the same approach that you have to take to the higher level math is applicable in other things that we involve ourselves in, in life.
What did you learn in the classroom about the way that young people acquire math and where they struggle and where you can help them make breakthroughs?
One thing I learned is that, people learn in very different ways. One thing I learned is that, you have to, develop the confidence. A lot of times it's the confidence, because a lot of people won't even approach the problem. They won't even try because they don't believe that they're going to win. So it's almost like, why should I even try to play this game if I know I'm going to lose? So we have to do things to try to establish confidence and give them some opportunities to win and really break things down and speak about them and like I mentioned earlier, meeting them where they are and show them ways in which they have actually been using math all along, or they've been using algebra all along. They just didn't know it, because that's where a lot of us fall into that, because like you see these memes that float around social media where people say things like, well, another day's went by and I still never used y equals mx plus b, right? Right? It's funny, but then you think about it and you're like, well, anybody that ever worked a job and you got paid by the hour and you wanted to calculate your paycheck in advance, right? You used y equals mx plus b. You just didn't know it. You used it because the variable y represents the amount in your paycheck. The variable M represents your wage, right? Whether you're making $10 an hour, $15 an hour, $8 an hour, and X is the number of hours you worked.
This is the problem, though. Now you hitting on a problem for me. First of all, why are there letters in math? There don't need to be letters in math. And second of all, like if you want to calculate my paycheck, I don't need X's and Y's and whatnot to do that. You tell me what my hourly wage is, how many hours did I work, and I have real numbers. Like it's just like, how much do I get paid an hour? How many hours did I work? That times that. Let's just do that. See, this is where like
algebra.
Let's make the word. No, I just did this times that.
Yeah. But see, we got to use the letters because the letters represent unknown value. So whenever in life we have a value that we don't know, we represent it with a letter, because what that shows is that in different situations, like let's say in this one particular job, you made $10 an hour. Let's say you work 2 jobs, right? The other job you make $15 an hour. So now you use the same formula and the same setup, and you can still calculate your paycheck.
Yeah.
And you just add those two together. So the formula, the letters are just they're just there to show you, okay, well, the letters are kind of like I was telling my nephew, because he's one of the people that I tutor. Shout out to my nephew Nasir, down in house in PG County, right? I was telling him, like, bro, like if you could clean your room and keep your room clean, then you can use formulas, because it's like you gotta read a word problem, pull out the pertinent information, and then just know, okay, well, the variable y represents this right here. So let me grab this 5 and put it in the place of where the y is. And then the variable x represents, this other number in the formula. So it's just like, after you do your laundry, okay, my socks go in this drawer. Boom. I fold my jeans up. They go in this drawer. Boom. I put my sneakers in the closet over here. Boom. Everything goes in its place. Then once you put everything in its proper place, then you start doing the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. You might have some exponents in there that you have to use. But it's really just about organizing your information. And again, so that's another skill that math gives us, the ability to organize information and understand, okay, this is where everything goes. Like everything has a place, everything goes here, this goes there, this goes there. And then but we got to do that first. And that's where the formula comes into place, because a formula is something that we can trust. It's something that's going to work. It's worked over repeatedly, right? And so once we have information, it's almost like it enables us to predict the future, right? Because if we know, okay, well, if y equals mx plus b in this situation, when m is this value, right? Let's say I work 40 hours in the week. Now I know how much money I'm gonna make. Let's say I work, I was really trying to chase the bag. Let's say I worked 65 hours that week. Now I know how much money I'm gonna make. So all I'm doing is I'm just replacing letters with numbers. Just replace the letter with the number. Just replace the letter with the number. But you got to understand what the formula means. Break that down for the students, for the young people, so they understand what it means. And then it's like the formula is really like it's a useful tool. Like it's meant to help us. So again, in terms of that rebranding I was talking about of mathematics is really seen as a bully. It really is by many of us, and I think collectively.
Well,
even those that excel it,
a bully with too many rules. That's what it's seen as, a bully with too many rules. Like if so, you just said the numbers represent, X or this or that or the other, but then orders of operations, and then everything has a rule to it. Yeah. And at some point you start saying, I'm sick of all these rules. Damn, what are you supposed to do with this and that and the other? Like, I'm really thinking like the struggling student who's looking at these things and thinking, do I really have to learn all these different rules? It almost feels like you're saying once you start getting into the habit of it, there's a muscle memory to it. And it's not, like it's not the thing that we've been taught that it is. Like it's I'm going to constantly feel stupid. The more I engage in this, I'm going to feel dumb the whole time. But at some point, it feels like you're saying you have a breakthrough. Yep. You start seeing what the formula is, and then you start reusing it, replicate and repeat. Yeah, see, I never really did that.
I call that mathematical muscle memory. Muscle memory. And then again, back to the rebranding, video games have rules. I remember, I was really good at video games when I was young, and I realized, okay, on this level, if I want to defeat this boss or this guy at the end of the level, I know what I have to do. I know I gotta run to this part of the screen, and I gotta shoot at this angle. And when he shoots back, he's always gonna miss me if I'm right here. That's the rule. I got to stand right here. If I don't stand in that precise spot, he's going to shoot me and I'm going to die. So I learned that rule. When I go to level 2, it's a different rule. It's a whole bunch of rules. Or with sports, we got to memorize the playbook. We got to know the play. Yeah. We gotta know the rules of the sport. And we also have to know our playbook. So with mathematics, there's a lot there. This is very true. There are a lot of rules. But what happens is a lot of times when you understand the fundamental concepts of math, then a lot of the rules build on previous rules. So then it becomes easier to understand the subsequent rules and memorize those because you already understand those fundamental rules. And even I was, again, talking to my students the other day, about how a lot of times people kind of get overwhelmed with memorizing formulas. And a lot of times you don't have to memorize as many formulas if you know one fundamental, basic formula, and then you can derive through use of algebraic techniques, the other rules. So it's kind of like I was like, okay, if you celebrate Thanksgiving, you make a turkey, right? But then you can make these derivative meals from the turkey. Like the next day you might make some turkey salad, or another day you might make turkey soup. But the original formula, like we was talking about simple interest, right? I equals PRT. So the interest income is equal to the principal times the interest rate times the amount of time. That's the fundamental formula, right? But what if I want to know the amount of time? So then the amount of time, I got to just divide P and R, move the P and R to the other side of the equation. So now I know that T is equal to I divided by PR. Now, some people could try to memorize that other formula, or you could just say, well, I know in algebra, if I want to get rid of the P and the R and isolate that letter T, which stands for time. So T stands for time in this case. I got to just divide by PR on each side. So that's the derivative formula. Or if I want to know the interest rate, same thing. I got to get rid of the T and the P. if I want to know what the P was, what the principal was, like what was the original amount of money that I had to start out with. I got to get rid of the interest rate and the time, the R and the T. So those are like those derivative formulas. But the key is like, understanding, getting into that rhythm and having the confidence to know that you can figure something out. Because if you don't, I can't remember like what Kwame Ture, was talking about this, back in the 1990s in one of his lectures. He was talking about mathematics. Like, he's like, he used the math student as like a metaphor for like, revolutionary struggle, right? You go into the revolutionary struggle, with this, like, with this belief that you can win. So a math student, you go into the classroom with a belief that you're not going to win, then you're already not going to win. But you have to have this belief that you're going to understand the concept and you're going to be able to do well. Another thing that's related to that, I think, is kind of like a lot of us have like an imposter syndrome involving math, and we don't properly, I would say, like measure our own deficiency in math. We think it's worse than what it really is, because we might remember, like when you take a test or a quiz, you might get a 60 on the test or a quiz, and that's a failing grade. In most school systems, a 60 is a failing grade, but that doesn't really doesn't necessarily mean that you did as poorly as you did. Like because you might have just made some careless errors here. You left a negative sign out, because negative signs kill people all the time. Like you leave one negative sign out, the whole problem's wrong. But it might be a 10-step problem. You might have did all the steps right, but you left that negative sign out. So now the answer's wrong. And that's why a lot of students, they like multiple choice. They feel safer and more comfortable with multiple choice. But what they don't understand is when you got multiple choice, there's no room for error, because if it's wrong, it's just wrong. And a lot of times, people that create tests, they'll purposely put those good wrong answers on there in the answer choices on purpose, because they know the mistakes people are going to make. Right. So a lot of times we're too hard on ourselves when we judge how good or how bad we are at mathematics. We think we're really, really extremely bad, when it's like, nah, you're really not that bad. Like I've had like students that I've tutored, and their parents kind of, come to me like with a sense of urgency, which they should be urgent, have a sense of urgency about their, children's education, but they kind of think it's worse than what it actually is. And then I start working with them. I'm like, you know what, you're not really that bad at math for real. You just gotta, pay attention to details. There's some fundamentals that you're lacking that are holding you up. So let's address that. Let's address those fundamentals that you're lacking. And then let's move forward. And then they start to get those correct answers, then they get the confidence. Then once you get the confidence, then you approach the problems differently. So our students start approaching problems differently once they get that confidence. Just like with anything, when you think you can win, That's why, a lot of times, like in political struggle, we don't, a lot of us, we don't think we can win. So that informs and influences our political decision making. And we kind of settle for certain things that are not going to really help us long term, or even in the immediate term. We just don't think we can win. So it's like, well, I might as well just go for this okie doke or whatever. They're throwing us a bone. All right, we'll take it. It's cool, because I don't think we're going to win anyway.
And you resign yourself at some point, though, when you're used to not winning, though. That becomes your muscle memory. Not winning becomes your muscle memory at a certain point. So you become resigned to it. Something you said earlier that I don't think that we went far enough on, though, is like when we talk about the pushback against woke math right now. You mentioned Diane Ravitch. I had something here that she wrote from 2005 about ethnomathematics that basically just said, and this is from 2005, so this is like 7 or 16 years ago, and she's talking about how the movement, now mathematics is being nudged into a specifically political direction by educators who call themselves critical theorists. They advocate using mathematics as a tool to advance social justice. Social justice math relies on political and cultural relevance to guide math instruction. And some of the stuff that she starts talking about here is about using like sweatshop studies, or using Mayan counting systems and ancient African systems or whatnot. What she ends up is she comes out very much against it. Like this is just kind of like a political racial pride building exercise, but it's not really math, right? Ethnomathematics isn't really math. How do you respond to that? Like, what's your take on that?
Well, it's for one, I believe that it's a fallacy. Like she's approaching this from a fallacious standpoint of that a lot of people share, which is this idea that the STEM disciplines in general, specifically math, are apolitical in the first place. Math is just as political as history. Science is very political because we got to think about, okay, well, what is the science being used for? Like there's a political necessity, a political use of it. Mathematics, like even if she says, okay, she argues that we shouldn't use sweatshops as examples of mathematics. Okay, so what you're trying to do is you don't want children to learn about what happens in sweatshops. That's political, right? If I give a math problem to a first grader, and or a first or a second grader, and we're talking about George Washington chopping down the cherry tree, and we say, okay, well, 58 cherries fell from the tree. That's political because you're already promoting George Washington.
Right.
A person that says, okay, after the so-called Revolutionary War ends, he says, okay, no, he goes to the British and says, okay, we want all our contraband back. We want all our black people, all our Negroes, our enslaved Africans. We want them back now, right? But you're trying to elevate him, right? That would not be seen as problematic for somebody like a Diane Ravitch, but that's political. It's all political. Anytime we talk, it's all political.
I mean, what would you think about the idea? Because she makes this point about ethnomathematics being like political, but not just political, but political correctness being foisted upon like innocent students. And then she also talks about like, this type of math is political because it divides oppressors and the oppressed into different categories or whatnot. So I wrote a piece about this a long time ago, having, read her thing. And it occurred to me that when we talk about slavery, we talk about Jim Crow or whatnot, that there was math involved in all of that because so black people learned that if you didn't bring in enough pounds of cotton that you got whipped, right? So you're learning math early on in the United States history. In history, you're learning a certain number of acres have to be, tilled, a certain number of pounds have to come in every night. And there's a negative consequence for the numbers being wrong. If you look at the ledgers of the slaves and the slave drivers, the ledgers that they kept, the math that they kept, like the records that they kept, all of that was teaching black people something early about their own being caged. Like their cage was a mathematical cage. There were all kinds of arrangements where, the owner of a plantation would allow you to farm out some of your work if you hit a certain number in your own production, right? And there's lots of stories of black people buying their freedom because they knew how to count up to a number to buy their freedom and then their wife's freedom and everybody else. So math for us was part of our oppression, though. It was for another group of people, it was part of their profit and their success in the world. For us, it was part of our cage. Do you think that there's any realistic argument you can make that lives within our skin, that lives within our psyche? Everything having to do with math about us, with voting rights, all that stuff was on a negative in some ways.
So you mean like in epigenetically, so to speak?
Yeah. Like, I mean, that's in you. Like we try to discount the connection that we have to the past, oftentimes, the lessons that we've learned. We think a kid walking into a classroom today is just a kid walking into a classroom today without any precursors to that individual who walks in today. I disagree with that. I think that there's stuff that's been passed down that is in them.
I believe that's valid. I think epigenetics as a concept is valid. Now I haven't studied it. I can't make a definitive argument, based on research, but with my limited exposure to it, it makes sense to me, even in terms of like, we think about the beginning of post-traumatic slavery syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. She talks about, she's in the bank and she's watching like, how, the little white boy is kind of, addressed and dealt with, within the bank. And then, the black mother and like her son, her black son, and how, these vestiges of chattel slavery. I was like, well, I don't want you to go out and explore. Like the world is not your oyster, but it's really done from a space of love and protection. It's like, I don't want people to know that you're inquisitive and that you're intelligent because, Mr. Charlie might sell you off because, you represent, more profit for him, So, I definitely think that carries on. I mean, my own grandmother, she kind of would do that with us, in stores, when we were young, and even like with like some of my younger cousins or, maybe my nephews, maybe, probably, like, oh, don't run over there. Don't go over here. Stay by me, but, and it's out of love, it's no no malicious intent there, but I do think a lot of those things get passed on. And even if it's not maybe genetically, it's maybe an issue of like nurture, through
Yeah.
practice. It's like, well, my mother did this, or my father did this, his father, his mother, her father, her mother, and so on and so forth. So,
or
yeah, these are things
our
we should.
oppressors did this to us throughout
Yeah.
all times. It may not even be my family member, but it's the way that we've understood policing, the way that we've understood, like the civil rights leaders had to do some civil rights math on things like how many jobs are we getting? How are the unions working for us?
Right.
Like we don't really talk about that part, but our oppression, there was mathematics beneath our oppression in all times. There is still today. We have to make arguments today statistically about disproportionality in crime and in the policing. We have to still make that today, right? So it's hard to be an activist without encountering some of these. See, now you got me arguing for math. But just if nothing else, to understand the nature of our oppression, you need math. There was a question here earlier and I didn't come back to it, but I wanted to. So Joshua Israel Stewart says, can we ask you to touch on how math is taught in other places in the world and how we compare? And I think the crux of the question is, Josh saw some things in Korea. I know I've seen some things where, like, the Singapore math book is this thin and American math book is like this thick, but somehow they outpace us in math oftentimes. Have you seen anything else, like when you look beyond what we do in the United States?
I really haven't. I've yet to really study mathematical pedagogy in other countries. Just heard little tidbits here and there about how things are done. But I do think that one of the things I've kind of heard of is just like the fundamentals being stressed, and at a more early age, and it being like, and again, Ravitch is pushing back on ethno-mathematics. I think the ethno-mathematics, which is basically mathematics rooted in one's own culture. There's a book, I forget the author of it. They wrote a book on ethno-mathematics between 10 and 20 years ago. Maybe I have the book, but I can't remember the author's name. I mean, that's important. Like, you deal with math in the context of your own culture. Yeah. And I think that can make things much easier. And then what happens is, like, within your own household, you're having more mathematical conversations, and that they're mathematical conversations, right? So when you go into school and you go into a math classroom and you're like, okay, this is the space where we're going to practice mathematics, you're already thinking that, okay, well, no, I know this already, because, we have these conversations. Or I might be helping my mother cook, and, she tells me that, 3 teaspoons is equal to a tablespoon, or they're the same thing. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, that's proportionality. That's ratio representation. Like, that's what that is. Like, we're doing mathematics, or distances. How many feet are in a mile? 5,280. So then I can calculate. How many. If I travel the distance is this many feet, then how many miles is that, or what fraction of a mile is that? So and again, so that's also something else that we're gonna have to have some serious conversations about as a community, about having some more intellectual conversations among ourselves and in our households and in our cars while we're driving and with our children. So when they go into these school spaces, until we create enough of our own independent schools where they will be nurtured at all times, but when they're going in these kind of hostile school spaces, they already are much more familiar with a lot of the vocabulary that they're going to be presented with, a lot of the concepts they'll be presented with, because we already talk about that in the household anyway.
Yeah, and that we've mentioned it, and you've mentioned a couple of times in this conversation around culturally relevant pedagogy, or just cultural. I don't know what you would call it, but making sure that there's not a cultural mismatch between the student and the learning environment. So, if I was a teacher or an educator in a classroom, I would know that if I was in Pittsburgh, or if I was in Stockton, California, or if I was in Pueblo, Colorado, that wherever I was, the concepts might be similar that I was trying to teach, but the context had to be different. Like where I was, I don't think that all teachers think that way necessarily. I've heard teachers say, like, the kids changed over time. Like, I've been a great teacher. Like, I've had some real successes with kids, but over time the kids have changed. And what they're usually meaning is that, like, the culture of the schools have changed, like the kinds of kids they teach are different, but their teaching didn't change.
Yeah, they wanted to stay static. They wanted to remain static. I mean, it's hard to. The concept great teacher is really it's a difficult concept because like you have to change so much. It's like you might have been great this school year, but then next school year, the environmental conditions change, the student population changes, and you're not starting from scratch, but you may not be able to necessarily continue on in the same manner that you were in the previous year. So it's almost like you, in many ways, you might feel like a rookie, and you have to embrace that. And a lot of people don't want to embrace that. Maybe the ego gets in the way. You don't want to embrace that. Okay, well, I'm not who I was at the end of last school year. It may not be this, again, mathematical term, this linear regression, or the graph is a straight line up in terms of like mathematical teaching ability. Go straight up. Like it might be like one of these like, stock market charts, or one of these like cryptocurrency charts. It goes up, goes down, comes back up, goes back down again, but you want to have higher highs because you're building on everything that you've learned as a teacher and everything that you've experienced. You're building on it. But, it's just, a lot of people kind of get stuck in that whole, well, I'm a veteran, so I don't got to change. I'm a veteran. I know what I'm doing. Kids got to change. These kids are crazy. I know what I'm doing. They got to, get with the program. And some people try that, and, you can try that if you want to. Good luck with that.
How's that working out for you?
Yeah, how's it working out? I don't know. But, it's like, again, I always quote my father. My father's been teaching for almost 40 years. He always, says, do you want to teach a curriculum? Do you teach a curriculum, or do you teach kids? Which are you teaching? A lot of people teach a curriculum. So they're not fine tuning anything. Oh, there's a SATA. Yeah.
So tell me about this. Like, this is your page, all this math. Tell me about hystematics first of all, because there's a video on here about hystematics.
So I did a presentation. Initially did a presentation at the in 2019 at the Teaching Black History Conference, sponsored by the Carter Center at the University of Missouri. Another shout out to Dr. LeGarrette King at the University of Missouri, and actually I tutor his son. And shout out to the work that he's doing at the Carter Center. So hystematics is like, Ravitch and those guys, they would really hate hystematics, because what hystematics attempts to do is, what I did is I just formalized, I guess the way that I've been teaching math throughout my whole career without even knowing it. I kind of just created a framework to, show ways that, we can combine mathematics with not just history, but, political science and cultural studies, and create cultural awareness and political awareness. Because, it's kind of just, the way I was doing things anyway. And a lot of times, we'd be in a geometry class or in an algebra 2 class, and I might just want to, it might be, May, and we wouldn't have to wait till May, but, we're in Philly, so it's like, Black children in Philly need to know about the MOVE organization, and they need to know about not only the MOVE bombing of 1985, but the shoot in when the Philadelphia police shot in their house that was in Powhatan Village, near 33rd and Powhatan in West Philly, near Drexel's campus, back in 1978, when the MOVE 9 got incarcerated back then, originally. They need to know about that. So I'm thinking like, a lot of times I would just have these independent conversations while students are doing independent practice, or, what we call classwork, right? Doing their classwork. And we just start talking about that. So I say, why don't I just create word problems that can incorporate that? So that way, you have the administrator come in and evaluate you, and then it's like, oh, well, are you teaching math? You're like, Mr. Parker, you're not teaching math right now. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, Miss, or sir, I am teaching math. This is, I'm just providing a cultural framework. I'm contextualizing it. They need to understand about these people, because, and that's one of the reasons that I became a teacher originally, was because I wanted to be able to educate young people on things that they may not have, that we as a community know that they need to know. A lot of us as elders, we're very critical of young people at times for not knowing things, and not knowing who this person was, or not knowing about this event. But the reality is, like, they just haven't been taught. So I'm like, okay, like, you got young people that, in Philly that never heard of Mumia Abu-Jamal, never heard of the movie.
Which is a shame. That's a crime.
Yeah. So So I'm like, I have this opportunity to, provide this information and talk to them about them. We could just have like an off the cuff conversation just about, who these brothers and sisters were, who Assata Shakur was, who's Fannie Lou Hamer, who are all these people, like, what did they do? What's their significance? And why should I care to know who they are? The mainstream media is giving you the commercial rappers, right? The mainstream media wants you to know them, and they have an agenda. There's a reason they want you to know them, because they're teaching you something too. There's another thing I ask my students, like, coming, listening to you with your AirPods in, listening to some music. I always ask them, what is he or she teaching you to do? They look at me crazy, like, what you mean? No, they're teaching you something. They're giving you a narrative. They're telling you a story. They're teaching you something. So what are they teaching you to do? Because I want them also to develop their own ability to have media literacy. So it's like, they got to start thinking critically about like what they're being told. Even if it appears as though this person is just innocently just telling a story, whether it be true or fantasy, about their own life experience, but they're teaching you something. They're modeling a behavior. They're telling you, okay, this is what you should do. Like a black man with a record deal that's rapping, has an album out. You're a black boy. He's being positioned as a role model. And he's saying, okay, this is how you deal with women. This is how you deal with money. This is what you should buy. This is how you should deal with other black people. This is what you should do with guns. This is who you should shoot. This is how you should shoot them. You're being taught all these different things. So at a minimum, it's like I want them to first start thinking about the fact that they are being taught that it's not just entertainment. It's
like that's a great point. Just in the thing that they know a lot about is the entertainment world. And like we have a charter school in St. Paul, Minnesota, high school recording arts, started by a musician many years ago. And the students there, I think the average age, like freshman age, is like 19. These are kids that have been left behind by the schools, have been out and he goes back and recovers them, and they have a full studio. So they do everything in the music business, from the production of the music to end, for all the way down to producing the CD and everything at the other end. There is so much math involved in that, like from the end to end production of it. And even in the production of the music itself, the math is so evident. Like it's just so clear that they are geniuses. But they would have never been a genius in the traditional system. They would have never been a genius sitting in a little desk in a row in a classroom with somebody lecturing them from the front of the room, right? Yeah. So there's a relevance to them coming every day. And there's this sense of like, I interviewed Sheila E. once. I don't know if you know Sheila E. Sheila E. is kind of an old school Prince era artist. Yeah. So she told me she left high school early. And she told me that when she came off the Purple Rain tour, she was $1 million in debt from the tour. Like she just went on tour with Prince, Purple Rain, the biggest album and biggest tour of the year ever, like one of the biggest tours ever. And she just didn't know how she came out $1 million in the hole. Well, she wasn't by herself. A whole bunch of those artists, I mean, like, Morris Day got paid $50,000 or something for Purple Rain or whatnot. None of them checked the math. And it was interesting to me, what I heard in all their stories, like listening to them, is how it hit them at some point that they had missed out on this part of schooling. Like this math part, it was all good, glamour and glitz until your money wasn't right. I think young people can understand that now that they've watched a million hip hoppers go broke and then some others not go broke. Some others like own the world. But do we care enough to teach them in ways that they care about? Do we care enough to like relate to them? I'm not saying hip hop is the only way, but I'm just saying whatever the way is, you need to find it. Because I know I was bored as hell with math. And I think actually, if we're being honest with ourselves, there's some math phobia in the world, but it's boring as hell. Like it can be boring as hell. It could be your most boring class of the day.
It can. It has those moments, and I guess that's another thing that we should probably talk about too, is having the conversations with young people about even if the topic is boring, some things are necessary. Some things are necessary, and you just gotta, again, another sports analogy. It's like there's certain conditioning in sports. You just gotta do it. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna, that running, you're gonna feel like you want to throw up. You want to pass out. But you just got to do it because it's going to make you a better athlete. There are many aspects of mathematics that may be boring, but you just got to do it. You got to go through it. And, and then once you get to, You get to that level where you get that muscle memory, and then you get into that rhythm. Then like the boredom kind of subsides, and then you get into the position where it's like, okay, like, because I have moments where it's like, okay, there are certain types of skills that I can just do just because I've been, by virtue of having been able to do them for like the last 20 years, right? And then I just, then I could throw some music on, just bob my head and just go in, just do some problems. Because now it's rhythmic. It becomes rhythmic. And it's like, I'm bobbing. The music kind of helps me. It's like, well, at least the beat, maybe not the lyrics so much sometimes, but depending on what it is. But sometimes we have to just accept the boredom. And I think we have to have these conversations with students, because another thing I kind of push back on sometimes, there's a lot of conversation about boring classrooms and learning being engaging. I'm for that. I'm for learning being engaging, but I think sometimes some people, they go to the extreme where and the students kind of internalize it. Well, if your class is boring, then I don't have to learn, right? Because they say, no, I want to be entertained at all times. I want this to be fun, and I can kind of see that more with younger children. But then you got high school students. You got like 16, 17-year-olds in 12th grade talking about like, nah, this class got to be fun, or I ain't doing nothing. Like,
I mean, you got teachers dancing in some
grown men. Like, what are you doing? Like, you need at the age of 16. 15, you need to be able to sit in a quiet space, and you need to have the level of self-discipline to be able to sit in a quiet space for an hour and just focus and be attentive.
I think that's a dope point. That point right there, like, no one is making it enough. I might fall into the trap of not making that point that you're making right now. In real life, there is boring stuff you're going to have to do. I guarantee you there are meetings that you're going to have to sit in, and you're going to have a certain face on. And you're going to have to be like looking like you all there. And in the back of your mind, you're doing your taxes, right? Like, that's just a skill. You're going to need a middle-class skill is being bored with a smile. That is a middle-class skill that we all have to have. If you worked any type of job that pays any kind of money, that's going to be real life for you. So maybe we're being a little light on this thing with, kids need to be entertained. You need to be dancing, and you need to be rapping in class and all that. I get it.
Or find or we can try to help them to develop, because this is something I need to develop also for myself, and I'll be 41 this month. How to take boring situations and capitalize off of them, and try to find not necessarily excitement, but try to find something intriguing or engaging within a boring situation. Like that presentation that, teachers can relate. A lot of teachers can relate to this. A lot of the PDs that we go to, professional development, seminars or trainings we go to, it's a lot of them be boring as hell. And we sit there and we're like, okay, this is pointless. And then we kind of can relate to the students, because the same students we get mad at for sitting in class, texting, or being on social media on their phones.
Now you're the student. Yes,
we do the same thing. Like with the teachers, we're doing the same thing. That's so one of the things we need to do, I think, as teachers, is to challenge ourselves to figure out, okay, well, what can I gain? What can I pull of value from this? Because it would be very easy for me to just zone out and just, get on Instagram, just like our students do. Right.
I mean, I hear it from teachers all the time. The biggest waste of time that they have in their occupation is PD. So they are sitting through the same thing that kids are sitting through sometimes, something that they feel like, what does this have to do with my life? Right.
And again, there's something in it, but I think there's work. Ideally, we wouldn't have to do the intellectual labor to find that thing in the PD. Ideally, the PD would just present it to us, and it would be like, from start to finish, it'd be engaging. I already see, I could use this. This is beneficial. But there's work that we can do to figure out, okay, well, all right, how can I use this? How is this? Okay, I know it's got to be relevant some kind of way. Let me keep thinking about what type of situations I might be able to apply this to. See,
Michelle says, she says, I got quitters because of Zoom meetings. That's what she got on Twitter. See, adults don't tell the truth either. Like, we say that we just work so hard and we do all this stuff and whatnot. We got our workarounds too. There was a question here earlier that I didn't get to about whether or not you find it more challenging to teach math remotely versus in person.
Remotely is more challenging because there's not as much of like the human interaction. And then, I don't know what type of situation somebody has going on in their house. So I don't really go so hard on people having their cameras on. And a lot of times, like, I can't read your body language sometimes. And I can't really, like, we're not, it's something about being in physical space with a person, having that rapport and, just, kind of vibing and, we're interacting like, like two people on the street corner, just having a conversation, just chopping it up. With education, I like that dynamic. And in the virtual world, I mean, we're doing the best that we can, but in the virtual world, we miss that.
Yeah. Final question, because I know we're running on time. You mentioned earlier that you also work with adults. And we know that, like, for kids, oftentimes they look to their parents or people in their houses and immediate people around them for help. Like help on, and oftentimes, like, people of a certain age, I'll just always use that as a disclaimer. People of a certain age will look down at homework and say, that is not at all the way that I was taught or what we do or whatnot. Are there any lessons or things you find as you work with adults too, helping close their knowledge gaps around math that you think we should pay attention to? I mean, we never really talk about kids, but we always talk about andragogy, like parents and adults.
Yeah, so and one of the things that I stress when I'm dealing with teaching the adult learners is, one of the things, because a lot of them, they want to get their high school diploma for the most part, because it's a point of pride for them. They want to be able to say they have a high school diploma, because they're like, I got these, my children. I'm always stressing them to go to school, stay in school, get your diploma, graduate. So I want to lead by example. And one of the things I say to them is I want you to be able to take what you learned in this class and be able to help your children with their homework. That's what I really want you to be able to do. And that's one of the things. So before we go, I want to also promote the All This Math YouTube channel, because I want the YouTube channel to become a popular resource for not only students to use and not only teachers to use as a resource to support their lessons, right? Because, as in terms of self-paced video support for the students, but for parents to be able to go to. Because a lot of times, parents are like, main complaint, oh, this new math, I can't do this new math, can't do this new math. So I want people to be able to go to the All This Math YouTube channel and see worked out examples. Because Khan Academy is kind of the industry standard. Khan Academy has some value. And there are also, 10,000 other people, on YouTube, doing math videos. But again, we have to talk about, everything's culturally relevant. Is it culturally relevant to our people? So, and then again, so I might be like in one of these videos on here on the screen, I might be showing how to use the quadratic formula, or what do we got? Rational expressions, factoring quadratic trinomials. But then there's an embedded, again, this is hystematics in real time. There's an embedded history lesson, because I have a Malcolm X Liberation University sweatshirt on, which actually was a college founded by, Howard Fuller. I forget his name at the time. He had adopted an African Swahili name. It was located in Durham, North Carolina. It was in existence. It was an independent Black college. He and some other people founded it in 1968. I first learned about that from reading We Are an African People, authored by Russell Rickford, which is a very important book. I recommend it to everybody, because again, we talked about self-confidence in mathematics. I believe the true solution is for us to have independent schools and independent educational spaces. When you read that book, you'll learn about, I think it's a very thorough documentation of examples throughout the United States, throughout the country, in contemporary times, of Black people starting schools. Black people of different political orientations, but we all knew, regardless of your political orientation, some people were like Pan-Africanists, some people weren't, but we're like, listen, we're Black and we got to educate our own. So I learned about the Malcolm X Liberation University, again, which only lasted for 3 years. But it shows that, we can even start colleges. We can start whole colleges. So you go to the YouTube channel, you see the video. I'm showing how to factor quadratic trinomials, which is something that's very typical, very fundamental, that our students should all know how to do. And then you see the sweatshirt and you're like, oh, what's that? I never heard of that before. So maybe you'll Google something, Because
all of that is communicating something.
Yeah.
Your total presentation. So folks, please go to this YouTube channel for one. I'm going to put it back up. Let me put it back up again. For one, because
and subscribe too. Subscribe,
like, subscribe, watch the videos, get the algorithm going is really what we want to happen. So you go, as you click on these videos and you watch them and you like them, even if you leave a comment, you are actually creating an algorithm that will drive more people to this work. So that's, and see, look at me with my math algorithm. See, I don't really understand what it means, to tell you the truth. I just know how
it's a formula.
There is one. So
it's a formula.
It's a formula.
Algorithm is just a formula. Fancy word for a formula.
So we want y'all to make it happen.
I want our people to learn math. So this is us being proactive and self-reliant. We don't gotta, with this tool, we're using the internet to, leverage our ability. Because I'm like, if I'm in a physical classroom, I might have 20 people in front of me. So with this YouTube channel, now that 20 people could become 20 million people, right? Just like with anything on the internet, the internet has really changed the game. In terms of exposure, in terms of what we can provide to people, like even this program, like, years ago, it would have been just me and you in a room having this conversation, and maybe it would have been recorded on audio. It would have been on a cassette tape,
and maybe it would have been on cable access.
Yes, exactly. Limited, right, to a local area. But now anybody in the world can watch this. So any of our people anywhere, you can go on the YouTube channel. It's free. It's a free access. Just have some pencil and paper, and just see if it makes sense, and if there's any way I can improve on the channel, let me know too.
I also want to send people to your website, allthismath.com. So this is the website, allthismath.com. Excuse me. It has Professor Parker's bio, more information about hystematics. There's a video on here about hystematics. And this is where you can find some of the tutoring information. So both the YouTube channel, the website, also when you go there and you click on things, creates an algorithm for Google. So search for it and then click on the search link to it, and then go to it. All this stuff works. It makes a difference, folks. Believe me. I would love to have you back again, man. As things, there are going to be more issues percolating. I imagine that the whole woke math fight is going to be heating up in places again. It'd be great to have you back to talk about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about it. I like to have those conversations like in house, like with us, because I tend to stay out of the fights, because I think, like I said earlier, like a lot of the people that are the detractors of it, they instigate these fights to distract us from doing the actual work, because they know if we can just take shots at it, then they're gonna come fight and argue with us, and then they're not gonna be actually out here doing the work, educating their children and whatnot. So I definitely want to definitely like to have those conversations about how we can how we can present it in real time, like what it can look like,
and what our parents should know about it, because I think this is bubbling up in school districts where one side of the equation is organized and they are fighting the school districts on it, and there's no resistance. So something might be changing in your math department in your school district and you won't even know it, because there's a group of people that are trying to root out any teaching of our kids of the nature of oppression in the United States. So before we go, there is one book that I like to recommend. It's called The Crest of the Peacock, The Non-European Roots of Mathematics. It's a book I had to read for a college program a while back. And when we talk about things like woke math or culturally relevant pedagogy or whatnot, one of the biggest lies that's embedded in math education that we teach our children is that it didn't come from them, and that there is no such thing outside of Western mathematics, that, without the Greeks and the Romans, that, math doesn't belong to anybody else. We're doing damage by teaching our children a selective history rather than world history. We're also teaching them damage that they don't have a place within some of the major kind of subject matters that we teach them, and teaching them that the roots of mathematics are non-European is not a trivial or small point. It's actually, it changes the game. It changes everything in terms of where you locate the things that you're being taught and why you should care about them, right? There's a group of people in the world who are taught every day that they invented everything, and that most of the world's greatest theorems and formulas and thinking and architecture and art and everything else comes from their group. That boosts your self-worth in the world and how you think about things. There's another group of people who are told that they haven't contributed anything to the mainstays of humanity. That's ridiculous, and we have to stop that. So, Crest of the Peacock. Go on Amazon, look it up. It's a great book on this. Thank you again, Akil Parker. I appreciate you, brother.
Can I say one final thought?
Yes, absolutely, man.
And wherever this debate goes with critical race theory or whatever the school districts do, we have other alternatives. Pending the creation of our independent schools, at least for mathematics, come to the YouTube channel. So all is not lost. Let's not feel like, if they're not going to give it to us, we won't get it. That's one of my goals in developing All This Math and developing the All This Math YouTube channel, so our people can have a resource. This is a resource for us, so our youth can learn mathematics.
You heard it here, folks.
In game.
You heard it. Go to the YouTube channel and share it. Share it with other people. I love word of mouth. I love people who share the things that they find with other parents, other activists, anybody. So appreciate you all for sharing another morning of great breakfast talk around education here on Unpublic. We'll be back again tomorrow with Nate Bowling, award-winning educator Nate Bowling, to talk about the what it really means for teachers in the classroom when states pass laws that outlaw or ban critical race theory. That should